Sing of the Pambansang Awit ng Pilipinas, followed by a doxology by James Warren Ahero.
Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silangan, nananap ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyag ka ng magiging, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisili. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mabaha, may nilagang tulad, awit sa paglayang minamahal. Pag-islap ng matawat mo'y tagumpay na nanininig, ang bituin na tara niya, kailan pang mali magdidilim. Lupa ng harangan, bakit pagsinta mo'y langit sa piling mo? Aming ligaya na pamay mga pirang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Bakit kaya? Bakit ka ba naghihintay? Nahimukin pa, pilitin ka ng tadhana. Alam mo na kung bakit nagkakaganyan. Lumulutang, nasasayang ang buhay mo, at ang ibinubulong ng iyong puso. Natutulog ba ang Diyos? Natutulog ba? At ikaw ay kaagad sumusuko. Konting hirap at munting pagsubok lamang. Bakit ganyan? Nasaan ang iyong tapang? Naduduwag, nawawalan ng pag-asa, at iniisip na natutulog pa. Natutulog ba ang Diyos? Natutulog ba? Sikapin mo, pilitin mo, tibayan ang iyong puso. Tanging ikaw ang huhubog sa iyong bukas. Huwag mo sanang akalain natutulog pa ang Diyos. Ang buhay mo ay mayroong halaga sa Kanya.
Project Pro-CARI, providing clear and reliable information about healthcare in this time of the pandemic. Good day, everyone! It is with great pleasure to welcome you all to this 8-day webinar of Project Pro-CARI. I am Renchan Dos Armenta, today's webinar facilitator. Project Pro-CARI is an 8-day webinar starting March 6 up to April 24 every Saturday. In line with their civic welfare training service subject, the proponent came up with a said project to offer transparent and accurate healthcare information, to be able to clarify how harmful the lack of awareness in healthcare is, and for the community to apply as a good healthy individual. This is timely and relevant now that we are facing a global pandemic. With that being said, may the webinar series successfully provide information about healthcare. Before I introduce our guest speaker for today, let us all first witness a euphonic intermission number from Christine Ponteres Cedo, a first year student of Bachelor of Performing Arts Theater in BUCAL University.
Still in my reflection mirror. Why am I doing this to myself? Losing my mind on a tiny error. And it left it with me on a shelf. No, no, don't lose who you are. In the blur of the stars, it's deceiving, dreaming is believing. It's okay not to be okay. Sometimes it's hard to follow your heart. Seems to me you're losing, everybody's bruising. Just be true to who you are. Brushing my hair, do I look perfect? I forgot what to do to feel the moment. The more I try, the less it's working. Yeah, cause everything inside me, there is a no, 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 no. Don't lose who you are in a blur of the stars. Seems deceiving, dreaming is believing. It's okay not to be okay. Sometimes it's hard to follow your heart. Tears up and you're losing, everybody's bruising. Just be true to who you are. Yes, those egos, fake shows like disco and leave me alone. Real talk, real life, good luck, good night. With a smile, that's why that's why just be true to who you
Thank you so much, Christine, for that impeccable and oozing performance. And now, our third guest speaker in this webinar series is an organization that supports children's growth, development, and educational advancement, and creates a positive economic impact for families and communities. Without any further delay, I am now handing it over to Child Care Aware of America.
Outside of the body. Uh, and so they frequently get better on their own. You have limited treatment. Examples of our viruses are going to be that common cold that is now arising in the fall winter season. Influenza, once again, is seasonal dependent. Measles, hepatitis B is a virus. Chickenpox is a virus. There are very few medications that will treat viruses. The next one being bacteria. These bacteria microorganisms can survive in or out of the body. Most common known ones are staph, streptococcus, salmonella, and shigella. These are very common infectious organisms and can be treated with antibiotics. A fungus is another type of microorganism that get their nutrition from other living organisms or dead organic matter. Our examples are thrush, ringworm, yeast diaper rash. Within the environment itself, you can have your mold, your mildew, and other spores and yeast. And based on where it's located, especially if it's on the surface of a body, it can be treated with creams or oral medication. Parasites, they live on or in another living organism. The ones that we know are the mites, the scabies mites, the pinworms, giardia, the lice, the tapeworms, and many times they need to be treated with antiparasitic medications, and sometimes they typically can cause diarrhea. Now we're looking at, in our world, in the clinical world, how is it translated and expressed when we have these symptoms of infectious diseases or conditions. So we have respiratory symptoms, upper and lower, can be causing cough, the presence of a runny nose and or nasal congestion, difficult or noisy breathing. We have GI symptoms that encompass diarrhea, vomiting, nausea, or stomach ache. We have skin symptoms. We have the rashes that present to us, the itching. And we have constitutional symptoms such as fever, aches, and behavior changes. And then we have other smaller categories of symptoms where we have eyes that, or other infected body parts that could produce drainage or irritation. And then we have oral, such as in our mouth sores. And we may have the presence of swollen glands. As you can see, I talked about the respiratory upper and lower symptoms, and in this pie chart that's taken from our Managing Infectious Diseases in Child Care and Schools, respiratory presence compasses 66% of our symptoms, followed by fever at 14%. And the third most common that you will see in your facility, and I'm sure you're going through your mind saying, yeah, I see that compares to what's happening with me if something does occur, that the third most common are our GI symptoms with vomiting and diarrhea. Now we want to look at symptoms versus disease. So we as caregivers, teachers, healthcare providers in the early childhood centers often worry about making a diagnosis. But remember, children develop symptoms first but don't have a diagnosis. And in the field, you do not need to make the diagnosis of a specific disease. What you do need to do is recognize the symptoms for which the exclusion is necessary. And so understanding as we roll through this webinar that exclusion is for each symptom is not always necessary. So, for example, a child can be excluded due to a rash with no behavioral changes. And a rash is a symptom, but it's not a diagnosis, it's not a condition. And if the child's activity level has not been negatively affected, the rash does not represent anything harmful to the child or others. But because we are worried that the child is contagious or harmful to others, then without evidence-based decision-making, we may make diagnoses that may not be accurate. So basing on the symptoms of the illness, it will guide you to whether there's a reason to exclude or not exclude. My role is to highlight the first part where it's an immediate reflex reaction. So if on arrival and your child in your facility has been accepted after their daily health check, and these symptoms develop suddenly, these symptoms of severe illness, it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is, call the EMS, call the ambulance, call 911 and notify the parents. So multiple children that suddenly become affected by an injury or an illness at the same time, not just one isolated case or isolated child, this would cause concern. Any child that has skin or lips that look blue, purple, or gray, any kind of abnormal rhythmic jerking of arms and legs, yes, that may indicate seizure activity. Vomiting large amounts of blood, large volume of blood in stools, and a stiff neck that develops in that child with a headache and the presence of fever, and then most immediately and emergently a suddenly spreading purple or red rash. The list is long because fever with difficulty breathing or abnormal skin color, the child suddenly becomes very pale, blue, or very pink, that's a reflex to call 911. A sudden acute change in the child acting strangely, becoming less alert or withdrawn, even more lethargic to the point of unresponsiveness or unconsciousness, reflex reaction, that's a 911. A head injury could be an accidental head injury witnessed with the following decrease in level of alertness, confusion, headache, immediate onset of vomiting, difficulty walking, irritability. That is an immediate need for EMS. Difficulty breathing, the child is unable to speak, or increasing complaints of severe pain or increasing pain anywhere. The child becomes develop signs of dehydration because hopefully on the daily health check, you will have had a first glance at the child, but the child stops drinking. There's no urination for many hours in the day. There are no tears. The child's activity level decreases. The child's eyes appear sunken. Then that is cause for a 911 call. And lastly, a cut or burn that is large or deep and will not stop bleeding. The second criteria of urgency. These are urgent conditions that may not need immediate EMS reflex, but will need medical care within at least an hour or so and parent notification. So these conditions don't need an ambulance as long as a parent can pick the child up within the hour. And we're covering a lot of severe conditions. This category is urgent conditions. And I think that all of us would recognize these conditions that would need urgent evaluation by a healthcare professional. So we have broken it down into fever above 101 in a child older than 2 months who looks more than mildly ill. Fever above 100.4 in a child younger than 2 months. So we have a separated category by age. Unexplained irritability, severe vomiting and or diarrhea, animal bite that now breaks the skin, venomous bites or stings, injury like a break to the skins that now may require stitches. So I recognize that level of awareness is being called on. For example, in venomous bites or stings, in areas where it is known that a venomous bite can pose a severe risk, then that requires an actual 911 call. But understanding that even I myself may not know in my own specific area what category this venomous bite would fall under, whether it's severe risk or urgent, then following a procedure protocol of just checking in with 911 or poison control will help guide you. Many of us have to use a lot of references, even healthcare professionals. Next level of category of symptoms requiring exclusion. Fever that develops with a behavior change. Diarrhea, blood in the stool, vomiting more than 2 times in 24 hours. The child is in your care, probably no more than 8 to 10 hours. So if you do see vomiting more than 2 times within that period, then that is considered in this category of calling the parent and having the child excluded. There are some cases of abdominal pain and drooling with mouth sores. Some of these symptoms will require a visit to a healthcare professional, but not all. These conditions are less severe than the first 2 categories, but they do require exclusion despite the lack of a diagnosis. And looking up and using your tools through looking up the symptoms in managing infectious diseases in child care and schools, or caring for our children, or knowing your local healthcare center, or having a healthcare consultant professional. So with that, going through that, fever by itself is not an exclusion category if the child is exhibiting normal behavior, because fever is just a representation of an elevation of the normal body temperature. So a child that may have had his immunization, his or her, then and comes the next day but is acting fine and still has the elevation of a temperature above 101 for a child that is over 2 months of age, then that is not a criteria for exclusion. Fever can be caused by signs of illnesses such as rheumatoid arthritis or cancer, can be a reaction to a variety of medicines. So with that, any child or infant, I should say, younger than 2 months with fever does fall into the criteria of getting medical attention immediately. The fever by itself is not harmful, but we really want to have that level of awareness that there may be the presence of an illness causing him or her to have a serious illness in this particular age group. The blood in the stool, if you've seen hard stools because you're changing, and there is light blood, and this is called constipation, passage of hard stools, so that may not require exclusion. But blood in the stool not related to passage of hard stools, yes, that is a symptom requiring exclusion. Also, to go back again into vomiting, if you already have a care plan for a child with a medical diagnosis of GI reflux, well, you already know if this is small spit-ups or some spit-ups from pre-diagnoses, then these children do not need to be excluded. And they should have a special care plan within their file. Now, any abdominal pain, so in that some cases that continues for more than 2 hours, or intermittent abdominal pain now with the presence of fever or other signs or symptoms of behavior change, then that child falls into immediate call for exclusion. Drooling with mouth sores pretty much stands by itself. Acknowledging that this list is long, everyone, and by referring to the symptom chart, once again, in managing infectious diseases in child care and schools, it also addresses when children with these symptoms can return to care, which I am not addressing in this particular webinar today. So, my role is talking about the impact of infectious diseases, and the whole scope of the webinar is looking at how can we provide you the tools and the awareness into looking at whether they're severe, they're urgent, needs immediate exclusion, or in the second half of this webinar, do they fall into mildly ill and category, and therefore the impact of infectious diseases that can hit our parents really hard, and the economic impact of it for the loss of revenue for our families, the loss of productivity for the employers, the disruption of other colleagues filling in for a missing parent at work, finding alternative caregivers, and then making that connection with the contagiousness of the symptoms that are presenting to you, when to send the children home sick, so that it will not lead to the kids being sent home unnecessarily. There was a New York Times article that was created on September 16th, 2019. I read it. It's a little harsh on our daycare and early childhood centers, but some of the take-home messages are, and that what we are promoting today is that using evidence-based decision-making, using evidence-based tools, you can take control, change thought processes, change culture, change thought processes within your own facility, within your own business, as well as sharing that across on your first contract with your parents, so that we can try to reverse what has been laid and can affect us in so many ways that are negative in that way. So with that, there's a domino effect. The child appears ill. We're hoping that you'll use your evidence-based decision-making skills that are presented today and can be fleshed out even more through your tools and resource kits, that you as an early education center will want to, through your daily health check, and ensure that the child is okay, that child can stay, or the child needs to be excluded in that way. By using universal precautions and looking at the thought processes that children are often infectious before they show any signs and symptoms, we can change our current practices to help everyone. Good news, bad news. So because our children are coming to us, they're being first exposure to many mild illnesses, they seem sicker more often, and you're going to acknowledge and validate that with your parents. But you're also going to discuss, have awareness that incidence of illnesses decrease as the child ages because their immunity increases as they build their own protective antibodies. So these children are developing their immune system in a very healthy way, and that exclusion is unlikely to reduce the spread of disease. So with that, I am going to turn that over to my counterpart as to continue this discussion as more detail enrolls as to whether to exclude or more inclusive to change culture. Thank you.
It is important to keep children in care when it is safe, and just as important to create a comforting environment for those kids who aren't feeling well. With that, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to Child Care Aware of America for their advocacy of helping the children and the community. Before we formally end our third part of this 8-day webinar, let us all first witness a video clip from the World Health Organization on preventing disease through health environment.
Wherever you live, your health is impacted by the environment. Around the world, more than 50 million people die every year from disease, and nearly 1/4 of those deaths are directly caused by environmental factors. Can you imagine? That's 1,400 deaths every hour of every day from an unhealthy environment. The hardest hit are those in low and middle income countries, especially in Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Western Pacific, and the young and old are most severely affected. More than half the world live in urban areas and can face heavy traffic, air pollution, poor housing, and limited access to clean water and sanitation. Many work in the informal sector under dangerous, dirty, and demeaning conditions. We all face the impact of chemicals and poisons, radiation, and poor farming practices. And climate change means a very uncertain future. So now we are at a crossroads. Things can continue getting worse, or we can work together to improve our world. Simple measures can be taken immediately to protect our health and the environment. We can reduce our consumption and clean our air by using sustainable fuels and walking or cycling more. We can safely store toxic substances in our homes and workplaces. We can protect our water resources by disposing of waste appropriately and introduce clean energy technologies. We can bring multiple government sectors together to ensure all policies actively support health. Let us all work together to improve our health and well-being.
Thank you so much to those who participated in the third day of Project Pro-CARI webinar series. The page is open for questions until 11 in the morning. Again, thank you and see you on the fourth part of the webinar next week.